it's Thomas Tuchel's first 2 games as England head coach, England manager, this week against Albania and Latvia. So, James, you were at the press conference last week, his first press conference, or his first squad press conference. So, there were 1 or 2 predictably tricky questions about national anthems and players that he's recalled. So, how do you think he handled it last week?
Yeah, well, I mean, his English is flawless, really. I mean, so good that he's able to laugh and joke and use a turn of phrase that you don't always associate with foreign managers when they're speaking in English. And I mean, just it's sort of incidental of nothing. One of the German crews asked him, it must have been a surprise for Jordan Henderson to receive the phone call. So when you said, "Hi, it's Thomas Tuchel," what did he say? And he said, "Hello, it's Jordan Henderson." And I just thought, I just really like that. But he's, having seen what he had to deal with at Chelsea, and asking him questions about, sanctions and war in Ukraine and, the club being put up for sale and all kind of unprecedented stuff. And he handled all of that so well. This, by comparison, was almost a walk in the park for him. So, yeah, very good, very authoritative, very engaging.
He's a really good communicator, and I suppose he's got big shoes to fill because Gareth Southgate handled those type of questions, as you mentioned with Thomas Tuchel at Chelsea, in his stride, didn't he? That was every press conference. It would be, what is Gareth Southgate's view on this world crisis today? So at least he's got that in his.
Well, but what Gareth had to do really was present the FA's position on things, and I think what the FA are trying to do and have acknowledged in appointing Thomas Tuchel is that they can't rely on him to do that because he's not steeped in the culture. He's not, as eloquent as he is. He's not. I think Gareth Southgate spent an awful lot of time thinking about these bigger picture issues. And I don't think Thomas Tuchel does. I think he's only focused on the football. And so I think you're going to see a bit more of Mark Bullingham and maybe the chair as well, Debbie Hewitt, to really present the FA's position on the bigger picture stuff so he can be left to the football.
But on leaving it to the football, should we actually care if he sings the national anthem or not? Do we care?
It doesn't bother me. I mean, I think there's a certain section of people who link that, probably overplay it to the idea of patriotism and passion and, wanting to do everything for your country to win. I don't know about you guys, but it's a nonsense, really
absolute nonsense. We were at Wembley yesterday, obviously the Liverpool fans booed the national anthem, that's a different matter, but to suggest that an England manager has to sing the national anthem because everybody in the country wants them to sing it is not true. And it's just, I don't know, I'll bite my tongue what I really think about it.
Yeah, I think obviously being from Merseyside, there is a very different view to probably a lot of the country in terms of the national anthem and what it represents and what it stands for, and everyone's entitled to that opinion. I personally I'm pretty indifferent when it comes to the national anthem. I don't really believe in booing it, but if that's what you want to do, fine. But in terms of singing it, it has absolutely no bearing on his ability to manage a football team. And, look at the criticism that Gareth Southgate got over the years, some of it warranted, some of it not. And he was probably as patriotic as they come. So I'm sure that if Tuchel is able to deliver on the pitch, then talk of the national anthem will be long forgotten.
And also, I just reminded that Jurgen Klinsmann, when he was USMNT coach and they played Germany, he sang both. So
can you imagine if Tuchel did that? I mean, that's great, but imagine if Thomas Tuchel sang the German national anthem. I dread to think what some sections of our fan base would think about that. But anyway, let's move on to the football. His first squad is, it was a surprise to see some of the names. I mean, Jordan Henderson back, Marcus Rashford. I think both a surprise to me, but Jordan Henderson, a massive surprise. I mean, first of all, he'll be 36 when the World Cup comes around. He's not been anywhere near the squad for a long time, and I don't think he's had a particularly great season at Ajax. So
I was just looking at the numbers. So the last 8 games, he's played a total of 158 minutes for them. So he's not playing regularly. He's not particularly in form. But I think what we're seeing here is, and Tuchel said it himself, the World Cup countdown starts now. They've got 6 camps, which is 60 days. He's only contracted through to the World Cup next year. He's only thinking about that. And I think you're seeing this in this first squad. He's squad building already for those finals.
So why waste a place on Jordan Henderson?
Because I think he's going to take him.
Really? At 36?
I think there's every chance that Henderson will go, because what he's already looking at is squad blend, the squad dynamic. It reminded me, the squad to somebody, one of the colleagues said this, and I think they're right. It reminded me a bit of the Euro 2020 squad, because I don't know if you remember this. This is a tough question for you both, but I'm going to ask it. Steve Holland, Gareth Southgate's assistant, said there was one player who was their player of the tournament at Euro 2020. It was Conor Cody. And he didn't kick a ball.
No, are you going to take Conor Cody to the World Cup because he's a good lad? Is he a good lad, Conor Cody, and he's a decent Premier League defender? But the Jordan Henderson thing, you left Liverpool, nearly 2 years ago now because he wasn't going to play. Now 2 years on after being in Saudi Arabia and the Netherlands, and he came short of nearly went to Monaco in the window. It's ludicrous to think he's going to be at the World Cup in 18 months' time.
I suppose the thing is, in any squad, I mean, how big will the squad be? Is it 26? There's always going to be a handful of players who don't go on the pitch, regardless of who you're taking. So maybe he's got that view and he thinks what he'll be able to contribute as a leader. And, having watched him for Liverpool for a decade, he is a fantastic leader. There can be no disputing that, and maybe he just feels like what he brings is better than taking a young player who probably won't get on the pitch anyway. But then I do sort of take the point in the sense of, there's a lot of young players who haven't got a lot of experience at international level, and how are they ever going to get experience when you've got players like Henderson who is, he was past his prime in his final season at Liverpool, and as Mark said, he's only sort of declined since then, really. So it's a strange decision.
Well, it is, but I think it's also informed by what's gone before. We know he had a handover with Lee Carsley. I suspect that he's also aware of the issues that there were in the England camp in the summer, which is the first time really Gareth Southgate had to deal with that in his 8 years, that there were issues internally. And I wonder whether he's looking at people like Henderson. And I think with Rashford, I think Rashford's quite lucky to get in. I know he's been bright, and I can see if you're thinking, well, could he play that kind of impact role off the bench, 20 minutes in a group game or a knockout game if you need him? Maybe, but
He's still not scored a goal for Villa yet.
4 assists in all comps, no goals. So he's not exactly tearing it up there, but I wonder whether he's looking at him and thinking, well, if there are question marks about his attitude, and we all know he's been criticised for that the last few weeks and months, one of the reasons why he ended up leaving Man United on loan, whether he's thinking, all right, well, let's take a look at him, let's give him one camp, let's see if he's committed. And I thought it was really significant actually when he was talking about Rashford. He was talking about the work he does without the ball, and he needs to keep that up, and he needs to press, and he needs to be maintaining that kind of diligence and that professionalism, because a lot of that is people forget all that side of it. They think of Rashford as what he can do on the ball, but I think that reveals what he really is trying to explore in calling up Rashford for this camp.
During December and January, when Marcus Rashford was looking for a club, I was told that he really wanted to get away because he felt that he could get in Tuchel's squad, because he said, I was told that Tuchel tried to sign him when he was at Chelsea and at PSG. So he's obviously a fan. But as Beth said, he's not scored yet. And I think the biggest winners of Marcus Rashford getting the English squad are Man United, because it means that their value for him might actually remain as high as it is. But he's not doing it at Villa. Just on the midfielders, by the way, James, I've just made a very quick note on my notepad here. Kobbie Mainoo, Morgan Gibbs-White, Jude Bellingham, Declan Rice, Curtis Jones, Adam Wharton. That's 6 midfielders. I mean, how many would he take to World Cup, and which one of those would Jordan Henderson dislodge?
Well, probably Adam Wharton.
And have I missed anybody off that list?
But yes, you're putting me on the spot, but I feel like there is one more. But I mean, look, he could take all of them. I mean, I'm trying to think how many Gareth took to the Euros. I mean, you could take, the thing is, in a 23-man squad, it would be a harder decision. Yeah. But I think with 26, you probably could take Henderson and everyone you just mentioned there.
Maddison, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I think Maddison's got a lot to do. He wasn't particularly complimentary about Maddison at the squad announcement, but no, I mean, look, I think there's definitely an element of he's picking players that he's liked for a long time. You think about Kyle Walker, who obviously he tried to sign Kyle Walker, and Walker has left City, fallen from grace.
Another one.
Reece James, he's only started 14 games or 14 appearances this season. Absolutely loved Reece James when he was at Chelsea. He was on best football he's ever played in his life, Reece James, under Thomas Tuchel as a wing back. But is he really in on merit at the moment? Probably not. And even you could argue Harry Kane, retaining him as captain. Don't think there's any doubt he should be in the squad, but we all, what kind of debate did we have after the Euros final about whether Kane should really still be leading the line for England? But is he an untouchable in this squad?
Well, he is, because nobody's emerged. Nobody's emerged to threaten him. Ollie Watkins hasn't really kicked on, has he, in terms of saying, I want to be the number one England striker? And I think Harry Kane is still the best option. And he was poor at the Euros. I mean, there's no escaping that. And he's playing for Bayern Munich, and you can debate all day long whether the Bundesliga is as strong and as relentless as the Premier League, so maybe playing there doesn't really kind of give you full indication of how good Harry Kane is at the highest level. But as it stands right now, he scored 30 plus goals for Bayern this season. There's nobody who can touch him. And that is, yes, he's not the player he was in terms of the England team, but he still scores lots of goals, so you have to retain him, I think, at that level. it's hard to find somebody who right now who's coming along to put him under pressure.
I also think that the whole stripping him of the captaincy thing, can you imagine what a massive furore that would be? And I'm not saying that he wouldn't be right to do that, because maybe there are other players who might be better suited at this moment in time. But, you know, spoke about the national anthem and it should really be a non-story, but it's been blown up into this big thing, and the whole Harry Kane thing would be as well. So you almost sort of think, is it worth the hassle of
no,
taking
you're
the
right.
captaincy off?
If you're on an 18-month contract, if you were on a 4-year deal, then you might think, well, actually, I'm building a new squad here. I'm really going to try and kick things on. Whereas I think, you know, he talked at the press conference about wanting to create a club feel, and I think people have got to get it out of their heads that he's not going to pick the 26 best players. He's just not going to do that. He's going to build a squad where he thinks, and I'm not. This is not me advocating for Jordan Henderson to go to the World Cup, because I wouldn't take him. But I can see the argument for saying, well, you don't just pick 26 superstars. It doesn't work. We've seen squads, other countries go to World Cups and implode before. You could argue the last foreign manager that England had, Sven-Göran Eriksson, did that. You know, and he was trying to shoehorn the most highly sort of regarded, lauded players into a team, and it didn't work. The balance was never right.
The one thing we always criticised Gareth Southgate for, and I think correctly, was that he never really kind of did anything bold, thought outside the box. He was very kind of safe. And I think, for me, we're going to talk about Dan Burn now. The Dan Burn selection, I think, shows the Tuchel X factor, because, you know, Dan Burn, I don't think any of us would have predicted Dan Burn was getting the England squad. But first of all, he scored a brilliant goal for Newcastle in the Carabao Cup final with that header, one of the best headers I've ever seen.
Get that one in there,
but if you've got Dan Burn in your squad at a World Cup, he's 6'7". We saw the threat he poses from set pieces, and he's a brilliant lad. He's 32, making his England debut. Dan Burn at a World Cup could be that kind of X factor that makes the difference. I'm not saying he's going to win you the World Cup, but if you're in a quarter final or semi final, you've got 20 minutes to go, you need a goal, and he comes on, that is going to put, you know, the opposition under a lot of unease. So what do you make of the Dan Burn?
If 6'7" was enough to get you in a World Cup squad, I would have gone by now. It would have happened.
Who is taller, you or Dan Burn?
We're the same height. Yeah. So I look at him and I think that could have been me.
Yeah, but he can play left back, he can play centre half, and we haven't got. Well, we've got good left backs, but they never fit. Ben Chilwell, Luke Shaw. So Dan Burn, obviously, we're a long way from a World Cup, but can you see that? You can see the value that he has.
I can, but then at the same time, the only thing that Tuchel was particularly guarded about at the press conference is how the team was going to play. He didn't want to say whether they were going to set up with wing backs or a back four, or if they were going to be high press, or how they were going to go about it. But I don't think Dan Burn starts in a high press team with 3 centre backs, does he?
No. But he's an option. That's what he's an option player.
Yeah, and I think there'll be, you imagine, he's obviously new in the role, you imagine there'll be a degree of experimentation given how easy we expect the qualification matches to be, with all respect to the teams that England are playing. But it doesn't fit with, it certainly doesn't fit with the Thomas Tuchel Chelsea side that I covered. And I am sort of interested to see just how much experimentation there is, and whether, you know, because Dan Burn would make perfect sense if you were going to be sort of more of a counter-attacking team and you were going to try and stay compact, and, you know, he's got to solve the perennial two England problems, which is that their centre-backs aren't strong enough and they don't keep the ball well enough.
But left-sided defenders are always a bonus. And a left-sided defender is very good in the air at set pieces.
And I think, you know, I thought it also was revealing that he essentially hinted pretty strongly that Lewis Hall would have been in the squad had he been fit, because I don't think Miles Lewis-Skelly would have made it otherwise, because he sort of, in praising Miles Lewis-Skelly, who has had a fantastic season and you know, arguably deserves his place, but he effectively said, well, he's brilliant, but we've got a load of injuries and we haven't got anyone who can play left back, so we've brought him in. So I think had Lewis Hall been available, we might not have seen both Dan Burn and Lewis-Skelly.
Beyond sort of the World Cup in 2026, if Tuchel doesn't continue, will there be a real pressure then for the next manager who comes in to be English?
Well, I mean, I was at St George's Park last week doing part of the UEFA Pro Licence media training, which we'll chat about in a bit. But I was speaking to a couple of people who were telling me that the FA, from the very top, from Mark Bullingham, the CEO, down, are determined to identify a homegrown coach or internal candidate to be Thomas Tuchel's successor, whenever that is. I think we all expect that to be after the World Cup. I think I'd be surprised if he carries on. So there's real pressure now within the FA to find basically an England manager that is English. And it's not easy because there aren't many obvious candidates. But I think obviously Eddie Howe was already very high on the list, but I think he put himself to the top by winning a trophy. No Englishman had won a major trophy since 2008. Harry Redknapp in the FA Cup. So by winning a trophy, Eddie Howe becomes, I imagine, the top choice. But How much would it cost to get him out of Newcastle? Does he want to leave Newcastle? Would he want to leave Newcastle? There's lots of questions there to answer about Eddie Howe, but I think there is a real pressure now within the FA and the system that's been set up to develop coaches. Because one of the real kind of issues for the English game is that, it's the best league in the world in terms of competitiveness and profile. The England team always kind of expects to do well at tournaments. We've got great players, Harry Kane, Jude Bellingham, some of the top players in the world, but we just don't produce English coaches. No Englishman has ever won the Premier League, which is, I can't imagine any other top league in the world without a homegrown or domestic coach winning it. So there's real pressure now for this coaching system at the FA to, give its money's worth really and find a coach.
Wasn't Eddie Howe the first English domestic trophy winner since Harry Redknapp?
Yeah, 2008, Portsmouth FA Cup.
Yeah. That's 17 years. That's remarkable.
I know. And, the FA have been, a good 15 years now, putting lots of money and resources into developing their coaches. Now, there's a lot of English coaches around, but they haven't really cracked the top level. Graham Potter got the Chelsea job and didn't succeed for a variety of reasons. Some not in his hands, some, down to himself. Beyond that, it's really... Frank Lampard and Steven Gerrard have had big jobs but not really kicked on.
Do you think, though, that there's a part of that is more of a social thing from an English perspective, in terms of, in this country, are we too quick to tear people down and sort of want to see them fail rather than...
There's factions.
Yeah. Because I think, Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, this country is so partisan when it comes to its football. There's fans all over the country who wouldn't want to see those players necessarily do well as coaches. It's
I suppose Gerrard, Lampard, Wayne Rooney, they probably get jobs bigger than they probably deserve for their inexperience, and then they get fired quicker than others, but because it goes away too quickly. So look, Steven Gerrard's first job, he was successful at Rangers, he won a league, and then he made the wrong choice at Aston Villa, didn't work for him, and he's ever since Unai Emery's kind of shone the harsh light on Steven Gerrard. Frank Lampard is bouncing back at Coventry. I think he's come through the system as well, but obviously I think there's only 2 Premier League coaches that actually went through the English FA's system of pro license. That was Graham Potter and Kieran McKenna. So I'm not saying the FA wants, preferably they would want a St George's Park trained coach, but that would restrict them to 2, candidates. But Eddie Howe did his coaching badge with the Irish FA in Belfast, so but that won't rule him out. But can you, in 18 months' time, it's probably less, isn't it? We're probably talking 15 months when the World Cup finishes in America. Right now, could you see anybody other than Eddie Howe being the English candidate?
Unless Graham Potter... I know from conversations I've had that had Southgate walked away a couple of years earlier, basically before Graham Potter took the Chelsea job, I think the FA had him pretty firmly in their sights. So I think if Potter can revive his fortunes at West Ham, and you would think he would be probably a lot easier to get out of West Ham than Eddie Howe might be out of Newcastle, then I could see him emerging as a viable option. But it's interesting that the names you both mentioned there, obviously Wayne Rooney, Lampard, Gerrard, they're getting jobs because of their playing careers. Yeah. We look at Tuchel wasn't a great player. Jurgen Klopp wasn't a great player. Right, Pep Guardiola, you could argue, is an exception to that. But where are the sort of average English players who are coming through? The thinkers of their generation who are coming through to become these top coaches. Why are we just relying on the sort of star names of the past to suddenly become turn it into management?
I've spoken to quite a few former players who are in the 40s now, and they really, really can't get jobs. They've got all the qualifications. The UEFA Pro license with the FA costs £13,700. It seems expensive, but I guess, you compare it to a university degree, it's not that expensive, especially if you're a professional in that top level of the game. But there's a belief or a sense, or maybe it's a perception or a kind of a paranoia, that English coaches find it harder to get jobs at that level, Championship, League One level, because you look at the Championship now, it's populated by coaches from Spain, from Austria, from overseas, basically, from Germany. English coaches find it very hard to get jobs in the Championship, which, they have to earn the right, but because of the influx of sporting directors, who many of them are, again, Spanish or German, that they go for people that they know. So the opportunities for middle-of-the-road, journeyman, so-called English footballers to get jobs are diminishing. And if you start at League Two, it's really hard to get to League One in the Championship, because all of a sudden, somebody told me this a while back, if you're a Premier League footballer and you take your first job in League Two, you're no longer a Premier League footballer, you're a League Two manager. And it's hard to make that step up. So to get the right opportunities, maybe the English coaches have to be a bit braver and start and look for jobs abroad. Graham Potter did that, but work in Germany, work in France, work in the Netherlands to try and build your experience and be successful that way. Because if you're waiting for a job in the English game right now, you've either got to be, as you say, a celebrated former player, or you've got to get yourself to the top level by winning promotions with the clubs from the lower leagues. And it's hard.
I think part of the issue is as well, though, we talk about the Premier League being the best league in the world, but it's populated obviously by coaches from overseas, and a lot of them are playing with a philosophy that's been brought over by Pep Guardiola, really. I mean, you go all the way down the leagues, so many teams now are trying to play in that Guardiola-esque way, which I suppose you would say is the Spanish sort of the tiki-taka kind of model of football, brand of football. What is the brand of English football? And also, if Eddie Howe were to take the England job, would people think the way that he played football was exciting enough for England? Because that was a lot of the criticism that was levelled at Southgate, wasn't it?
It's
really?
not front foot enough.
It's not front foot. So then, you have to sort of make a sacrifice somewhere. Do you sacrifice that by bringing in, a Tuchel, a coach from overseas, and let them implement their philosophy? Or do you want an English brand of football, but then what is that identity?
You need a personality as well. I mean, I think the Lee Carsley experiment kind of showed that what that was shining light on Graham Potter, really, in the sense that would Graham Potter have the personality to handle being the England coach, because he didn't have a great playing career. So that gets back to the situation where you've not played at the top level, you've not won at the top level. And Lee Carsley found it difficult because he didn't have that. Well, he obviously played at the top level for Ireland and Everton and teams of the Premier League, but didn't have that ability, that personality, that presence to deliver the job. So I think if you're the England coach, any top coach, you have to be good at your job, but also have the personality and the charisma and the presence to do it.
Just on this course, Mark, you mentioned the cost of it. Presumably part of that is factored in because they get to work with you.
Absolutely.
What were you teaching them?
Well, so the course is that the pro license involves loads of different modules. It's basically, I suppose it's like a master's degree for coaches. If you want to manage the Premier League, you have to have a pro license. So it's coaching modules. It's all sorts of issues around the game, but also part of it is how to deal with the media, because it's a huge part of the game now. So I've done it for 7 or 8 years now, probably even longer actually, and we have to give the cohort, the wannabe coaches, I guess, a kind of a mock press conference. So we do the mock press conference, the post-match press conference. They also have to do a kind of a soft focus, football focus style interview where they have to reveal more themselves, and a post-match flash interview where 2-3 minutes after the game. So in many ways, it's kind of telling coaches what not to say, which doesn't help us in our industry. But they're basically encouraged to find what they call an island. Stay on your island. If there's something controversial happens, don't come off your island. So some of the scenarios that we put to coaches are: one of your players has been accused of racially abusing an opponent. The opponent says that he's going to quit the game if you don't do anything about your play. What are you going to do about it? It's a very difficult situation for a manager to be in, because you have to, first of all, kind of show that you're backing your play without overly backing your play in case he's guilty of racism, while at the same time showing sympathy. So we put coaches through these scenarios. Another one is, you've dropped your star striker. His girlfriend's tweeted at 3:00 in the morning that you've lost faith in him and he's never going to play for you again. And you should be sacked. So difficult scenarios for these coaches to handle. And can you imagine if Mikel Arteta or Ruben Amorim walks into a press conference and he gets one of these questions? They're quite tough to answer. So we have to kind of give them an idea as to what they're going to get. Now, the bonus from our point of view from the media is that we get to tell these prospective coaches the best way to be managers in terms of dealing with the media. Try and engage with the media. Try and not see them as an enemy. Try, give them something, and then they'll give you something back. Build a relationship. So it's difficult at times, because obviously a lot of these coaches are now from the generation of players that haven't really been encouraged to speak to the media, or when they have, to give little away. So there is an innate suspicion, I guess, of the media at times, and it's breaking down those barriers. But it is part of the course, and it's over the years there's been a few that have gone through. I think we've done people like Nemanja Vidic, Graham Potter was on a course one year, Steven Gerrard's done it, Wayne Rooney's done it. This time we had Phil Jones was on it, Trevor Sinclair. Sonia Bonpastor was very good in the mock scenarios. Carla Ward, the Republic of Ireland coach, really impressive. So a lot of these coaches are already in work, but some are recently retired players who want to be in work and want to get the coaching qualifications. But just on the cost of it, I think £13,000 for a professional coach or professional footballer is not too kind of straining. The issue for me, and this gets back to the point we were saying before about English coaches, if you're a coach who wants to coach your kids' team and wants to get a qualification and just to show that you're coaching with some sort of expertise, the entry level coach is is the B licence. That costs £1,200, and it takes 9 to 12 months with the English FA. Now, if you're just a kind of an average, mum or dad who wants to coach your kids' team, £1,200 over 9 to 12 month period, it's a big commitment. I think the FA should maybe look to either half that or do it or fund it themselves. Fund thousands of coaches, to help them start on the way to becoming a coach. Just don't make them pay £1,200 because I think in any time that's a lot of money, but especially in difficult financial times, £1,200 to have the ability to coach your kids, it's just too much.
And you've been doing this, you said, 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
And we've just lamented the lack of coaches coming through. Well,
yeah.
everybody, there's your answer. Now we know.